Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika lah. Wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan abduhu wa rasuluh. Which means in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, all praise is due to Allah, the Lord of all the worlds. I bear witness that there is nothing worthy of worship except the one God. And I bear witness that Muhammad ibn Abdullah, sallallahu alaihi wasallam, may the peace and blessings of Allah be upon him, is his last divinely sent messenger and the seal of the prophethood. Ameen. Assalamu alaikum and Ramadan Mubarak. We want to welcome our friends in South Africa, the United States, and around the world to this week's edition of A Conversation with El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. I am pleased to be your host, coming to you once again through the Salam Media platform out of Johannesburg, South Africa. Salam Media is an online portal for humanitarian journalism. We don't just report the news, we advise you on what you can do about it. Brothers and sisters, friends, we are now in the final days of this blessed month called Ramadan, with a topic that is both painful and important. Our topic for today is Palestine in crisis, a Zionist ritual. Today's broadcast includes videos and a pictorial display that speaks louder than words. A display of young Palestinians killed from the start of Ramadan this year through April 14th, roughly a 2-week period. Brother Saalak, please show the display, the pictorial display.
هذا القمع وهذا البربرية التي قام بها الاحتلال من أجل قمع شعبنا وتفريغ المسجد الأقصى المبارك على مرأى ومسمع من العالم أجمع. هذه البربرية التي استخدمها الاحتلال في قمع شعبنا الآمنين الذين أدعوا من أجل أداء صلاة الفجر، وتم قمعهم واعتقال الشبان والاعتداء على المصلين.
Okay, my engineer, my brother engineer kind of jumped the gun on me. I actually wanted that photo display to be shown, but we got the first video instead. Okay, if you have the photo at your fingertips, Brother Saalak, please show. Yes, that's what I wanted to be shown. You know, brothers and sisters, Subhanallah. These pictures, these photos, they represent human beings. All of them are sons. Some are brothers, husbands, fathers, and extended family members of loved ones left behind. Palestinian women, children, and elders are also being brutalized and killed. Zionists are trained to be equal opportunity oppressors. Now, with that being said, you can take the photo away now, my brother. Again, you know, these represent just the young men that were killed in the early days of this month of Ramadan. Others, the lives of others have been taken as well. Now, you just saw the first video. The first video captured Israeli soldiers engaged in a favorite pastime, brutalizing Palestinians at the Al-Aqsa compound. You know, there are videos that are much worse than those in terms of imagery, in terms of what is graphically being shown. There are videos much worse than that. I gave you, we gave you, I should say, you know, one of the we gave you a video that was lighter in terms of imagery, the brutal imagery that these heavily armed soldiers have been engaged with. This was one of the lighter videos. SubhanAllah. So, with that said, I want us to go now to the second video. The second video features a young brother. Let me describe it first. A young brother describing how routine this has become as an annual ritual. All right, let's see that video, Brother Sadiq.
Every single Ramadan, it's the same horrific images that dominate our screens. Worshippers being shot at by rubber bullets, mosques being shaken by smoke grenades, the elderly disregarded and shoved, fathers beaten in front of their children, and in true Israeli style, Israeli officers bullying those half their age. And as usual, all this takes place as a precursor to the bombing of the Gaza Strip, which we have only witnessed this morning. Evidently, it seems that events in Palestine have fallen on deaf ears, whereas only a month ago, the world and media platforms stood in collective outrage at the horrors that unfolded in Ukraine.
Flagrant violation of international law.
News outlets celebrated heroes that took up arms against the Russian aggression with the Molotov cocktails. Yet today, in response to the Palestinian struggle, we see a stark and a bitter contrast. Media outlets continue to reduce Israeli aggression to a mere clash between opposing sides. Articles single out and cast blame upon Palestinian children for merely throwing rocks at some of the most equipped military personnel in the world. Let's be clear, this is not a clash. The United Nations, alongside Amnesty International, have actively labeled Israel as an apartheid state. So you would expect that the language should change. The double standards have also leaked into the workings of social media. Last month, we saw Facebook and Instagram drastically change their policy on hate speech to accommodate for posts urging violence against Russian invaders. Yet today, we are seeing accounts and pages actively being shadow banned and having their videos taken down for simply showing what is taking place in Palestine. It's an unfortunate recycle pattern that we consistently see. Yet despite the continued attempts to subdue and demoralize the Palestinian people, the continued aggression by Israeli forces, the psychological warfare, the constant abuse, the heckling, and the desecration of sacred symbols, as time and time again we are shown in their attempts and schemes they are met with the unwavering spirit of the Palestinian people. Free Palestine.
Free Palestine indeed. The third video features an Israeli soldier describing how the terrorizing of Palestinian individuals, families, and communities is official state policy. It's not just, soldiers and police and settlers just acting out, out of the norm. These what you call them, these bad apples in the barrel, just acting out of the norm. No, this is state policy. Let's see that video, my brother.
I don't believe that a soldier who served in the occupied territories has clean hands. It's not that I think that we are all, it's not that every soldier murders innocent Palestinians. Far away from that. But no Israeli soldier who served in the occupied territories, his hands were clean after that. Because at the heart of what you do, there is no way of seeing Palestinians as equal human beings to you. I'll just give you one example, which is, nothing extreme, nothing exceptional, something very routine and banal. I served for 14 months in Hebron. Right now in Hebron, as we are sitting here and having this discussion, there are 2 military patrols that their job is to do what we call in the military to make our presence felt. What does it mean? The military logic says this: if Palestinians will get the feeling that the IDF is all the time everywhere, they'll be afraid to attack. So what do to give them this feeling? You make your presence felt. You start your night shift patrol, 10 o'clock till 6 o'clock in the morning, 8-hour shift. You walk in the streets of the old city of Hebron, break into a house, Palestinian house, of course, not a house we have intelligence about. I'm the sergeant, I lead the patrol, I choose a random house, wake up the family, men one side, women the other side, search the place, you can yourself imagine the dynamics, yeah? Climb to the roof, jump from one roof to another, come out through another house, wake up the family, and basically that's how you pass your 8-hour shift. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, from September 2000 when the second Intifada started, till today, now. It didn't stop for 1 second. Yeah, the idea is that every Palestinian will feel the military is right here. You don't know when we're going to show up, what we're going to do, when it's going to end, how it's going to look like. It's to do what we call in the military, ליצור תחושת נרדפות, to create the feeling of being persecuted. Now, when this is your mission, again, this is not an action of a rogue soldier or officer. This is your mission.
SubhanAllah. I thought that video was a little longer, but anyway. We have a fourth video that we're going to show, but I want to say something about what you just saw and heard. I have been connected to this issue of the occupation, the brutal occupation of Palestine for many years now. Again, it was in the early 80s, after the siege on Lebanon, that it really hit me hard when I saw what happened, like so many others in different parts of the world, at those 2 Palestinian refugee camps in Lebanon, Sabra and Shatila, and the role that then he later became prime minister. At that time, he was over the military, Ariel Sharon, the role that he played in facilitating the massacre of primarily women and children, and very senior aged men. The men of fighting age had already they were already induced to leave the refugee camp under the the lie that was told to them that if they left, there would not be any violence. If they would just leave, if the men of military age would leave the refugee camp, there would be no onslaught on the camp. And it was a trap. It was, subhanallah, it was a very ugly and it was a very deadly trap. The camps were attacked by the right-wing Lebanese forces under the protection and no doubt the guidance of the Israeli soldiers under the command of Sharon. And a lot of innocent blood was taken. This is what was for me, a very frontal hit on my conscience as it pertains to what had been going on for years and years and years in occupied Palestine. I ended up in the wake of that carnage, writing a poem titled Israel, O Israel. It goes like this: a nation of people born from injustice, causing great sorrow in all civilized among us. You claim your only concern to be your security, but your true intent is plain enough for everyone to see. There are Jews among you who detest what you do, but their voices are muffled and they seem to be few. You're proud and you're arrogant, malicious and clever. You seem to think world sympathy is going to shield you forever. Oh, but the bed is too short and the covers are too narrow. You can't see the handwriting for your scope is too narrow. Aggressive you've been since the day you were born, from the anguish and misery of lives you have torn. Israel, O Israel, where will you be when the pages have dried on your history? So that began my journey, my intellectual and emotional journey into the crisis in Palestine that's been going on for decades. For decades. It's hard to believe that once upon a time, Muslims, Christians, and Jews lived in peace, side by side, in what was known as Palestine. This was when Palestine was under Muslim rule. As a testament, for those of you who don't know me, or a proof, I should say, as a proof of how long and how deep my involvement in this issue has been. These are two books that we published over the years. The Palestinians' Holocaust. This is a large book, almost 300 pages. The Palestinians' Holocaust. American Perspectives. And then this much smaller but equally important book, The Message of Rachel Corrie, the young American woman that was killed in March of 2003 in occupied Palestine while trying to prevent the destruction of a Palestinian family's home. Like I said, the Zionists are equal opportunity oppressors. Despite this long and deep involvement in this issue, rarely am I called upon by my Palestinian brethren in the United States to be part of their programs when they want to bring attention to the issue. And it's because of how I am viewed by Zionists, the soft Zionists, not the hardcore, but the soft Zionists. And some of our brothers and sisters have a tendency to how could I put it, favor trying to develop relationships with them over having a close relationship with their brother in Islam, for those who are Muslims, or an African-American activist who is and has been deeply involved in this issue and can speak intelligently on it. Could easily be a bridge builder, between communities, between tribes around this issue. But we have a tendency to, to want to appease by whatever means we possibly can folks who we should be not appeasing. But that's another story for another time. That just came to mind right now because, it hurts me when I see what's going on in occupied Palestine. And it hurts me to see the games that are being played in other parts of the world, sometimes ostensibly in the name of bringing attention to what's happening in occupied Palestine. The compromises we make sometimes just add to the problem. But I digress. Let's go to the fourth video. Well, before we go to the fourth video, let me just say something about it. The fourth video is a rare, and I mean rare, example of the press in a so-called democracy, quote unquote, doing what it's supposed to do. Here you have a CNN broadcast journalist. I believe she's an anchor for CNN, Christiane Amanpour. She is interrogating the Israeli prime minister on oppressive Zionist practices that violate clearly established international law, and she is pressing him the way that any self-respecting journalist is supposed to do. Let us see that video, Brother Sadiq.
No, sir, you cannot say that to me.
Let me
you
finish.
Cannot tell me I'm lying.
Christiane,
Mr. Prime Minister, I said a minority of extremists. Why do you allow Israeli soldiers to go into that mosque?
Yeah, well, Christiane, there you go again, starting the story in the middle. But the actual fact is that last Friday, at about 5 a.m. in the morning, roughly 300 Palestinian rioters entered Temple Mount Mosque with explosives, with stones. They began desecrating their own mosque, burning, throwing stones, and preventing about 80,000 decent Muslims from going to pray. My responsibility as Prime Minister of Israel is to provide freedom of prayer to everyone in Jerusalem, including Muslims, which is why I had to send in policemen to remove the rioters, and it worked. Indeed, 80,000 Muslims went on later to pray peacefully. So, when faced with violence, you have to act tough.
Mr. Prime Minister, you say there I go again. Clearly there's violence. We all watch it. We can see what happens. But let me now quote your own Israeli security people. Again, the context. The West Bank has been occupied since 1967. Settlers are allowed to be there. It is a minority, I know that, but they're there and they are violent, this minority. And it is generally deemed illegal by the rest of the world, the settlers in occupied territory. But that's a background to what I'm going to quote to you.
What you've been projecting is blatantly false.
Why do you say that?
Overwhelming majority. I'll tell you why I say it, because it's a lie, simply a lie.
No, sir, you
cannot
say.
You got to see it to believe it. Christiane Amanpour, to her credit, may Allah bless and protect her. to her credit, she did what any self-respecting journalist who considers him or herself a professional should do. But it's rare. It is rare for an Israeli official or an American enabler of Zionist apartheid to be interrogated in that way. We need more of it. We need more of it. And this brings me to how I want to conclude today's broadcast. I want to go back in history. I want to go back in history, back in American history, back to the time of the founding of this quote unquote republic. This republic that likes to view and promote itself around the world as a land of liberty and justice for all. I want to go back in time to the father of this country, George Washington, and his farewell address to the Union. If you've never read Washington's farewell address, I encourage you to do so. It is a long read. It's a long read. So, you have to be ready to settle in for, some serious time and reflection. Get yourself a cup of coffee or a cup of tea and just read and reflect over what this leader, this father of the American experiment, the first president of the United States, had to say to his compatriots, especially the political leaders, with emphasis on them, on what from his perspective they needed to do in order to safeguard this experiment in democracy. It's a very thought-provoking read. I'm going to just share with you a few excerpts relating to this issue. Yeah, you're going to be shocked. It does. Even though, the state of Israel did not come into existence until 1948, but what Washington said relates directly to this apartheid state and America's relationship with it. Washington said, quote, "The nation which indulges towards another an habitual hatred or an habitual fondness in some degree is in some degree a slave. It is a slave to its animosity or to its affection, either of which is sufficient to lead it astray from its duty and its interests." Another quote. "So likewise, a passionate attachment of one nation for another produces a variety of evils. Sympathy for the favorite nation, facilitating the illusion of an imaginary common interest in cases where no real common interest exists, and infusing into one the enmities of the other, betrays the former into a participation in the quarrels and wars of the latter, without adequate inducement or justification. It leads also to concessions. Listen good. Concessions to the favorite nation of privileges denied to others, which is apt doubly to injure the nation making the concessions by unnecessarily parting with what ought to have been retained, and by exciting jealousy, ill will, and a disposition to retaliate in the parties from whom equal privileges are withheld. And it gives to ambitious, corrupted, or deluded citizens who devote themselves to the favorite nation facility to betray or sacrifice the interests of their own country without odium, sometimes even with popularity. Here's another one. Excessive partiality for one foreign nation and excessive dislike of another causes those whom they actuate to see danger only on one side and serve to veil and even second the arts of influence on the other. Real patriots who may resist the intrigues of the favorite are liable to become suspected and odious, while its tools and dupes usurp the applause and confidence of the people to surrender their interests. That wasn't coming from El-Hajj Mauri Saalakhan. This is coming from the father of this nation loaded down with contradictions, the United States of America. The type of relationship that President Washington warned his compatriots of is the very type of relationship America has today with the apartheid state of Israel. These flag-waving hypocrites in the various offices of government, from the White House, the Oval Office on down, through the U.S. Congress, both houses, the U.S. House of Representatives and the U.S. Senate, reinforced, as quiet as it's kept, by the U.S. Supreme Court. In fact, one of the leading Zionists that helped to facilitate the establishment of the State of Israel and the facilitation of support coming from the United States to that apartheid Zionist state was a U.S. Supreme Court justice. Brothers and sisters, we have got to really reflect deeply on what the responsibility is that we have vis-a-vis this challenge which is right up in our face, this challenge that pulls down, it weighs down the better of the two Americas. It prevents the better America from being able to emerge as the America the Beautiful. This is a slogan in name only. The better America, the more beautiful America, has been subdued for far too long, for most of this country's history. We have seen little glimpses here and there of the potential for that other America to emerge. Little glimpses here and there, but for the most part, we have seen the America that is ugly as hell, oppressive as hell, on the domestic foreign policy front and on the domestic policy front and on the foreign policy front. And this is what puts us all at peril. Why? Because as Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said so eloquently, the moral universe is long. The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends towards justice. It bends towards justice. In my conclusion, we just have 4 minutes left. Today's broadcast. In my conclusion, let me say this. Mufti Menk has been embroiled in a controversy, unfortunately. And it's an ugly controversy, and it's wrong. I think it's very unfair. It's very unjust. It's very unjust what some of our brethren have been doing and some of our media have been doing, just going to the extreme and criticizing him for a circumstance that pales in comparison to what many others have done. And this was a circumstance where he was not even aware. He has explained what the situation was. He was not even aware of the presence of this prominent Zionist before being invited, and he didn't stay long, and he didn't speak, and he didn't, go through all of the stuff that so many of our leaders, quote unquote, go through when it comes to being in the company of prominent Zionists, making pretend that everything is all right. He didn't behave in that manner. And so what the criticisms that I've seen leveled against Mufti Menk are just, it's just beyond the pale. We have Muslim leaders and activists who just routinely engage in normalization activities with the Zionist establishment and its functionaries throughout the West, especially here in America. We just saw it before coming on the broadcast today that some criticisms are quietly being leveled against a prominent figure, a Muslim figure in the DFW area, a prominent, very knowledgeable Muslim leader who is part of an interfaith gathering. And let me say this. Let me just give a little piece of advice in closing to my interfaith gathering brethren who love to be in these settings, hobnobbing with people of influence from the different faiths. It's time for Muslim leaders and activists in the U.S. and other parts of the West to practice BDS in their interfaith activities. And if you can't do that, then at least when you are present in these spaces, speak truth to power in each and every interfaith gathering you participate in. Use it as an opportunity in the presence of the faith leaders from the Zionist Jewish community and sometimes the Zionist Christian community. Use this as an opportunity to speak truth to power in those spaces. Make folk a little uncomfortable in the name of truth and justice. If you can't at least do that, you are serving as a quiet facilitator of injustice. And with that, I close, as we normally do, with the Surah Asr. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wal Asr. Innal insana lafi khusr. Illa alladhina amanu wa amalu salihati. Wa tawassaw bil haqq. Wa tawassaw bis sabr. Which means, in translation of the meaning, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, by the token of time through the ages. Surely humanity is in loss, except those who believe and do good, and exhort one another to truth, and exhort one another to patiently persevere. Peace be unto you. Assalamu alaikum.